I had not gone into the Hush Gallery in 11 years, and I would not have gone in that morning either, if the steward hadn't told me the new girl was in there again, dusting, same as every week, and that she'd asked him a question nobody had thought to ask in 4 decades. She'd asked him if the horn was actually broken, or if everyone had just agreed it was. My brother Corin built that dish with his own hands when he was 22, out of salvage from 3 different courier hulls, because he said a proper long-range beacon shouldn't need a whole engineering division to keep it fed, just someone who understood it. He flew off in the ship that carried its twin, out past the Vantrell relay stations, the year the Hush came down over the border worlds and swallowed every channel for 11 days straight. When the static finally cleared, 9 systems reported wreckage. Corin's ship was never among the confirmed dead, and it was never among the found either. He simply stopped answering, the same as everyone else out there that year, and after enough seasons of nothing, we built him a gallery instead of a grave, and put his half of the beacon in it, and left the door mostly shut. I had 3 chief signal masters over those 11 years attempt to revive it, each with better instruments than the last. All 3 told me the same thing in different words. The crystal had crazed, the diaphragm had corroded past any output, and whatever the horn had once heard, it was past hearing anything now. I believed them. It was easier than not believing them. The gallery itself was a modest room, for something so heavy with meaning. A stone half-circle with a domed skylight gone milky from age. Corin's dish mounted on its cradle at the center like something still waiting to be finished. And along the walls the ordinary things he'd left behind. A scavenged toolkit, a chart of relay stations long since renamed, a boyhood drawing of the 2 of us that our mother had had framed without asking either of us first. I had walked past that drawing 1,000 times in my life and never once, in 11 years, walked in to look at it properly. It was easier to let the door be shut. Grief you can close a door on is grief you can manage for an hour at a time, and I had a kingdom that needed managing in hours, not years. The girl's name was Tamsin Vale. She'd come to us 3 years before, as cargo does, in a manifest of refugees off a colony world called Pharaoh's Reach. After a border skirmish nobody outside the Reach much remembers now. She scrubbed floors in the East Wing and had, for reasons the steward never quite explained to my satisfaction, been given the gallery on her weekly rotation, a duty none of the other maids wanted, on account of what it was. I found her with a rag in one hand and her ear pressed nearly against the dish itself, very still, the way you'd stand if you were trying to hear a kettle before it whistled. "You're not meant to touch the apparatus," I said, because it was the first thing that came to me, and not the kindest. She straightened up without any particular hurry and looked at me the way people look at you when they haven't yet been told who you are and don't especially care. "I wasn't touching it, Your Majesty. I was cleaning the housing same as I do every week. There's a sound in it, not loud. Comes and goes with the weather, seems like. I asked the steward if anyone had listened for it lately and he said the machine's dead, so I didn't want to make a fuss." "It is dead," I said. 3 signal masters confirmed it." "With what, if you don't mind my asking?" I told her. Acoustic imaging. Resonance mapping, a diagnostic wand from the capital that cost more than her wages for a decade. "None of that's an ear," she said, not unkindly. "Just as a fact, the way you'd say a door was painted the wrong color. My father scrapped hulls on the Reach before the Reach was gone. You learn to tell a dying engine from a resting one by putting your own ear against the block, because the wands only tell you what they're built to listen for, and engines don't always fail where you're pointed. I'm not saying your masters are wrong. I'm saying I heard something Tuesday that wasn't wind." I should have thanked her and left. I had a council sitting in 40 minutes and no patience that morning for grief dressed up as hope, which is what I took this for. Instead, I stood there while she went back to her dusting, working a soft cloth along the seam where the resonator crystal met its housing, the same unhurried motion she'd clearly done every week for 3 years without anyone once asking her what she'd noticed. "There," she said, more to herself than to me, and blew a fine gray silt off the crystal's face, the accumulated dust of 11 sealed years, and pressed her thumbnail gently along a hairline groove in the housing rim that I would never have seen on my own. "Somebody packed grease in here ages back to seat it tighter, and it's gone hard as tar. That's likely half your trouble right there. Not the crystal at all, just old grease choking the seat so nothing sits true against it." She worked it free with the corner of the rag and a wooden pick she carried for grouting tile, patient as anyone I've watched do anything, and I stood in a doorway I hadn't stood in for 11 years feeling entirely useless, which for a king is a rarer and stranger feeling than you might think. Then she leaned in and, very softly, not a signal, not a code, just a woman humming 3 low notes because her hands were busy and it was a habit, tapped her knuckle twice against the housing rim to seat it, and the horn answered her. Not words. Not yet. just a thin, warbling tone that climbed and steadied, the exact three-note pattern she'd hummed, coming back to us a half-second late, like an echo that had waited 40 years to find a wall to bounce off. I have heard grown men in this palace insist that time stopped for them once. I always assumed they were being poetic. I was wrong. I did not move. Tamsin did not move either, rag still in her hand, staring at the dish like she'd woken it by accident, and wasn't sure whether to apologize to it. "That's not a resting engine," she said quietly. "That's a reply." It took the better part of that day and the following night. Real signal masters this time, working from what Tamsin had found rather than around it, to tune the horn well enough to pull a message clear of 40 years of static and cold grease. It was fragmentary. It was Corin's voice, aged the way voices age, cracked in the middle from disuse, but plainly, unmistakably his, repeating coordinates for a listening post on the far side of the Vantrell relay that no chart in this palace still carried. He had been transmitting, on and off, whenever conditions allowed, for the better part of 4 decades, into a dish he had built himself, and had every reason to believe was still listening, because he had built it to last, and because that was the kind of stubborn, hopeful man my brother had always been. "We are sending a courier ship out past the Vantrell relay within the fortnight. I do not yet know what we will find there, whether we will find my brother at all, or only the listening post he built to wait for us, and some record of how long he waited. I have stopped letting myself guess, because guessing is what I did for 11 years instead of listening, and it got me nothing. 3 signal masters gave me their honest expert judgment, built on real instruments and real training, and I have no quarrel with any of them. A wand built to measure one kind of failure will always miss a fault it was never built to hear. It took someone who had spent her childhood with her ear against a dying hull, rather than a diagnostic screen, to know the difference between silence and grief wearing silence's coat. Tamsin came back the next Tuesday to dust the gallery, same as always. I was there again, uninvited this time, and I asked her to sit rather than stand, which she did with the same unhurried calm she brought to everything, including kings. "I only cleaned it, Your Majesty," she said, when I tried to thank her properly. "It was dusty. That's the job." I did not press a title on her. I have learned, this past week, not to trust my own instinct for what a moment like this is supposed to look like. I asked instead if she would keep the gallery on her rotation, permanently, whether or not anything ever came through that dish again, because I did not want it to go 11 years unlistened to a second time. She said that was no trouble at all, and went back to dusting the scene where the crystal met its housing, humming those same 3 low notes, out of habit, while I stood in the doorway and let myself hope, properly, for the first time since the hush came down.